Real stories of werewolves, of Dogman from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
Werewolf Trap Fail. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I grew up in a crazy family, but our cousins in Wisconsin were even crazier than we were. Have you seen that show on TV where those hillbillies keep building traps to catch cryptids and the monsters keep getting away? Well, if you have, then you've essentially met my cousins from back in the day. No, none of the actors on that show are related to me. I just mean that when I would get sent to stay with my cousins because my parents were fist-fighting again, or because my uncle who hurt kids escaped from jail, or any of the other heartwarming reasons that Mom felt it would be too dangerous for me to stay with her, my cousin's life always seemed to be like I tuned in the middle of that cable show about catching cryptids. They were always setting up some Rube Goldberg device to try to catch a monster that I was never even sure was real. I kinda got the vibe that most of their monsters originated at the bottom of a bottle of their homemade moonshine. I'm not trying to say that my cousins were insane because they tried to capture cryptids. I'm just saying that they were insane and also they tried to capture cryptids. I remember when I was an older kid, almost an adult. I guess I must have been 15 or 16 or 17 by that summer, and my father had somehow destroyed the kitchen while I was at church, so I got sent back to Wisconsin to stay with the fam until Dad cooled down. This time when I arrived, they had gutted their old ancient garage and rebuilt it into a large, cage. But not like a prison cage, more like a giant bird cage. Some of the thin metal used in the caging was so old and rusted, it looked like it would collapse if you blew on it. It wasn't going to hold anything large. The cage was too fragile. And it wasn't going to hold anything small either, since some of the spaces between the skinny bars were so wide, a grown man could climb in and out of that cage with ease. I asked my uncle what they expected to trap in that thing, and he proudly told me they were going to trap themselves, a real werewolf. I laughed so hard that my uncle got a bit insulted, but I simultaneously hurt myself because I was holding most of my laughter back. That was just the funniest thing I'd ever heard. I mean, I was used to my family clan talking about Bigfoot all day long, but this was the first time I found out that they thought werewolves were real too. Well, I had my laugh and it was good and long. And then, soon after, sure enough, a real-life werewolf came along and took his turn, laughing at me. I remember telling my uncle that cage wouldn't hold his mythical monster, and he asked me why not. I reminded him of the time that he, I, and one of his sons had come within 100 feet of a mama bear and her 2 cubs, and I reminded him of how scary she had been when she stood up and scared us all away. Uncle was like, so what? This werewolf we're catching is even stronger and wilder than that mama bear. Which of course meant that he was making my point for me. No way that chicken coop of a cage would hold a mama bear. If he wanted to catch something even wilder than an angry mama bear, well, he was going to need something less rusty and rickety than what I was looking at. So he got angry and called me a dumb city kid, and he pointed out the stone pillars built at each corner of the structure that it was braced on. Those were from the original garage building. They used to have a wooden structure built upon them, and now it was this sorry thing instead. The columns seemed to have been made in haste, around 100 or 150 years prior, by taking rocks from around the area and cementing them together. It looked like they would be pretty solid until something large hit into one of them. Not so sure after that. So anyway, imagine my surprise when one morning I woke up a little bit before usual to a whole lot of screaming outside my bedroom window. I got dressed fast and ran downstairs to find that not only was there a large furry creature trapped in that former garage, but it looked to be a large male werewolf-looking thing. I walked in circles around that garage, looking at the beast from every angle I could. It was not a costume. Any costume made by my uncle or cousins would look as bad and flimsy as this monster trap I was walking around. That was some kind of living animal, although what kind I'm still not certain to this day. I'm sure you basically know what I was looking at already. It stood up like a man, but its legs were more dog-like than human. Its front legs were more like furry human arms than they were like the front legs of a canine, though. And the paws, although not entirely different from bear claws, had opposable clawed fingers that looked a lot like thumbs. It would naturally rest its paws holding onto the wire bars as it looked out at us, and it resembled the way a man in prison might hold onto some bars in his cell. Its head was canine, but it also reminded me of a bear in some ways, other than the pointed ears and the length of the snout, which was longer than most bear snouts. So, was it a mutant pointy-eared bear with hands? Was it Jack Nicholson or Lon Chaney Jr. in costume? Was it a canine beast as large as a bear that walked upright? I don't know what it was that I was seeing. I suppose it was the Midwestern Dogman, but what does it even mean to say that? We humans have never gotten one in captivity. We've never had one studied by science. Science! I told my uncle we should call the local college to come take custody of the creature, for safekeeping. I told him we should call the zoo, call the Smithsonian, call the newspapers. My uncle gave me a dirty look and got sarcastic with me. I thought you didn't believe in werewolves, city boy. So how come now you telling me what I should do with this here figment of my own imagination? Everyone laughed and made fun of me for not believing in the werewolf, and for not expecting the cage to hold, which it barely was, by the way. Hence my urgency about notifying someone else to take over from this point forward in the name of science. Uncle told me that my jaw was hanging open so far in surprise that they were all going to start using my mouth for an ashtray and a spittoon. That got a big laugh from my cousins, who joined in, mocking me for being wrong about everything so far. But the more I said the monster should be turned over to some institution or another, the more my uncle and cousins insisted that this Dogman was their property, and they were going to use him to get rich. I asked how, and they told me that nobody was going to be allowed to see the monster until they paid my uncle a full $1. And if they wanted to take a picture, why, that would cost $10. Everyone congratulated my uncle on his fine business mind, and they started discussing what improvements they could make to the property once regular money started flowing in from the exploitation of the Dogman. I told him we should go get someone from the newspaper and bring them back to see the monster and take a picture. Uncle asked why. I said if they ran a photo of this monster, then maybe we could raise enough money to build a real cage to hold the beast. Uncle asked if people could buy a picture of the monster in the newspaper for 10 or 20 cents. Why would anyone pay him $10 to take a photo? Then he told me I didn't understand anything about business and shooed me out of his way. Uncle started assigning each of us boys to run off and perform some different errand for him. I told him I thought it was us gathered around the cage that was holding the Dogman where he was. He was probably just waiting for a moment when nobody was looking to attempt to slip out of that cage that had so many holes in it. Uncle gave me a dirty look and said stuck pigs make happier sounds than I do. And then he sent me on my way. Sure enough, by the time I got back from this useless errand, the Dogman had already escaped. Uncle was looking at his failed trap, trying to understand how the creature had gotten out. We all pointed out the 3 places in the alleged caging that were large enough for any of us to squirm through. And Uncle disagreed, insisting his cage was impregnable and inescapable. He threw a lot of polysyllabic words around as though that would bring the Dogman back. But no matter how hard Uncle argued with reality about how the Dogman could not have escaped, reality kept winning the debate every time, because that Dogman had escaped. Nobody had even seen him leaving, and we had no photographs or other evidence that he had ever even been in the crappy trap in the first place. It was a fail in every sense of the word, although to my family, I was the only one who had failed. I was the only stupid one because I hadn't believed that the Dogman could be trapped. For months and years, Uncle and my cousins bragged about how they had been the only men in history to capture a Dogman. If I would dare point out that the creature had escaped from them in under 3 hours, they would ask how many Dogmen I had captured and how long I was able to hold them. They would tell and retell the tales of how they collected the materials to build the cage out of, how they used rotting deer meat you could smell for 1/8 of a mile away to lure the monster in, and of how idiotic city-dwelling me had wanted to give the monster away to the Smithsonian Institution. They would tell the last part as though the current situation was somehow better than the beast being studied by science. They had let the creature get away, and now all their brief capture of the beast meant was an anecdote you could tell after a beer or two at a party, and that was that. No evidence was collected, and humanity was brought no closer to understanding what a dogman really is. Instead of proof and true answers, all we got in the end was a werewolf trap fail. My brother captured a dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. My brother captured a werewolf one time. It was probably a dogman in our opinion. He didn't hold it long, but I saw it with my own eyes and I know this story is true. This was way back a long time before I ever heard of the Dogman, which was when I saw it on Monster Quest on cable. I don't remember what year that was, but I was an adult by then. And the story I'm talking about was when I was a kid back in the 1970s in Michigan. There was about 6 or 8 years when my dad's job in Detroit paid well enough that we lived in a home like people do on TV. And we had an in-ground swimming pool and stuff like that. We were out in the burbs close to the woods, and that was the best time of any of our lives. It would all crash down in the 80s and 90s, but for a while, my family got to live like kings. Like Al Bundy or Archie Bunker, owning our own home, like we were BlackRock or something. My brother, who I will call Earl, had been seeing the Dogman at night outside our house. He had begun waking me up so I could see the beast, too. It looked just like you would expect it to. Dark, silvery fur, tall, pointed ears, glowing eye shine in the night. It stood up like a man, and it seemed taller than our dad, who was not a short man by any stretch. We were looking down out of our second-story windows at the thing outside at night, but its head looked a little too close to our window. It felt like he was 20 feet tall. But these are memories of when I was a little shrimp myself. All my memories of things back then are probably larger than they actually were at the time. We started to tell our parents over breakfast that there was a werewolf prowling around our room at night. We were both into horror movies back then, and so our parents just thought we were being creative and imaginative. When Earl asked Dad if we shouldn't do something about it, Dad told Earl that he was trusting him to come up with some good plans to put into motion. Of course, Dad was just humoring my brother, but neither of us realized that at the time. We thought Dad had deputized Earl and placed him in charge of protecting the family from the Wolfman. We both took the assignment very seriously, believe me. So when Earl was 15 and I must have been 13, I guess, our parents decided to go away for a weekend and leave the two of us alone. This was when we decided to put our plan into action. We would capture the Dogman ourselves while our parents were away, so as not to place them in the line of danger. Our parents did not understand how truly scary this cryptid was, and it would be wiser to leave them out of the loop. We were very protective of our mom and dad. We always saw the Dogman standing in the same area in the trees. Earl took pork chops out of the freezer in the late afternoon, and he tossed a couple of them on the ground near those trees. Then he laid pork chops, spare ribs, hamburger meat, and whatever else we had that he thought the Dogman might like, in a line on the ground leading back to our house. His intention was to get the Dogman to wander over to our kitchen door, which Earl propped open. Inside, he laid more meat on the floor leading down to the basement stairs. At the bottom of the staircase, Earl laid a tripwire that would slam the door back into the kitchen shut, trapping the beast in the basement. To me, it seemed like a genius plan, like something out of a movie. I felt like Earl was brilliant beyond anyone else on the planet. Yet even I was surprised to hear that door to the basement slamming loudly shut at 3:20 a.m. And when I ran downstairs and met Earl in the kitchen, neither of us could believe that we had actually trapped something. What we trapped, though, we would have no way of knowing until we went downstairs and looked. Earl excitedly opened the door and peered down into the pitch darkness of the basement. We both saw the glowing eyes, and then the pointed-eared silhouette. This was some kind of a man with a canine head. This had to be the creature we had been seeing. This was exactly what we had hoped to catch. Those angry eyes began loudly charging up those stairs at us, and Earl quickly slammed the door shut, locking it. We both ran upstairs to our bedrooms, crying like little girls, which was not our nature. We were wild boys in those days. But that monster had reminded us that we were still just kids, and we were suddenly way out of our league. Heck, we were out of our parents' league by that point. Then we both ran upstairs and cowered in a corner pathetically. Once we had calmed down a bit, we started to try to figure out what to do. We had put a lot of thought into catching the Dogman, but no thought at all about why we wanted to do that, or what we would do with the creature after we trapped him. So it wasn't so much that we had to come up with a plan B. It was that we needed to finish creating plan A. When our parents called to check up on us, neither of us had the nerve to explain what had happened, although Earl did mention that we ate all the meat in the house already and asked if there was more. As I have already indicated, those were rich times for our family, so they just thought it was funny that we boys like meat more than vegetables. And they shrugged off the expense of having to stock up on meat again when they got home. I know Earl was trying to lead into telling them about the captured Dogman in our basement, but he never worked up the courage. And soon it was dark, and we were too scared to go back downstairs at all. As the sun rose on Sunday morning, Earl woke me up and said we had to figure out how to get that Dogman to go away before our parents got home that evening. We had to clean up and pretend nothing happened somehow. This was the best plan he had been able to come up with. So we both nervously walked downstairs and noticed how quiet it was. Maybe the monster was sleeping. Maybe it had starved to death from no food being in the basement. We had no idea what to expect. When we reached the kitchen, everything was how we had left it. The door to the basement was intact and had not been busted down. We slowly opened the door and peeked down there, but we couldn't discern any movement or bad odors. Shining a flashlight didn't reveal anything either, until we noticed the window high off the floor had been broken. That window was one that Earl had once gotten stuck in one time, so it was too small for the Dogman to have possibly crawled out of. He had to still be down there. Yet we both went downstairs into that basement, and the Dogman was long gone. The only way he could have gotten out was through that window. The window that was too small for him, and yet that was how he got out. It just had to have been. The rest of our day was mopping and cleaning meat up from everywhere in the kitchen and stairs and out back. The Dogman was a sloppy eater. When our parents came home, we were nervous as hell that we had missed something, but I guess we didn't. They were just happy to be home, and we all crashed and got ready for Monday. It was like nothing had happened, and the Dogman didn't visit us anymore after that either. Maybe he got his fill of pork chops, or maybe he just didn't appreciate that. My brother captured a Dogman. Well, what do you know and what do you see? Our newest executive producer is named LB. Please join me in thanking LB, our newest executive producer who made this episode possible. LB got to see our recent secret members-only Dogman stories. Mama punched the Dogman in the face. If you'd like to see this one too, then you should listen to the advice of this next little guy, Henry. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.